The Empire's scout ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its sensors immediately scanning the seemingly peaceful blue planet ahead. The ship's captain smiled, anticipating another easy conquest for the mighty Galactic Empire. That smile quickly faded as his ship's warning systems suddenly screamed to life. "Captain, we're being watched," his sensor officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. "Multiple tracking systems, far more advanced than anything we've encountered before." Before the captain could respond, a clear message in perfect galactic standard cut through their communication systems. "Imperial Scout Vessel Thirar 271. You have entered restricted space. Your hyperspace signature was detected 20 minutes ago. We've been tracking you since then." The captain froze. No primitive species should have known their ship's designation, let alone detected them in hyperspace. As he struggled to process this information, his view screen activated without any input from his crew. Admiral James of the Human Defense Force appeared on their screen, his gray uniform crisp and professional. He sat at a simple metal desk, hands folded calmly before him. "Welcome to Earth space," he said, his voice carrying no hint of fear or awe that most first contact species showed. "We've been expecting you for some time." The captain tried to regain his composure. "How dare you intercept an Imperial vessel? We represent the might of the Galactic Empire, rulers of 1,000 systems." Admiral James merely raised an eyebrow. 947 systems, to be precise, including the Centauri colonies you acquired last month. He paused, letting that sink in. "We've been watching you for quite some time." The captain's purple skin paled to a light lavender. None of this was proceeding according to the standard first contact protocols. These humans shouldn't have known anything about the Empire, let alone classified military information. "Your Empire has a pattern," Admiral James continued, opening a holographic display showing the Empire's expansion over the last century. "You find developing civilizations, overwhelm them with your technological superiority, and absorb them into your empire. It's been quite effective. Until now." The captain found his voice again. "You dare threaten the Empire?" "No threat," Admiral James replied calmly. "Just a friendly warning. Humanity isn't like the others you've encountered. We've had time to prepare. We've watched. We've learned. And we've built our defenses accordingly." As if to emphasize his point, hundreds of satellites suddenly decloaked around Earth. Defense platforms that had been completely invisible to Imperial scanners revealed themselves, their designs unlike anything in the Empire's database. "I suggest you return to your superiors," Admiral James said. "Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that Earth is not a target for conquest. In fact," he smiled slightly, "you might want to warn them to stay away altogether. It would be safer for everyone involved." The captain's training finally kicked in. "The Empire will not be intimidated by primitive tricks. We will return, and you will learn your place in the grand order of—" "You're currently targeted by 37 different weapon systems," Admiral James interrupted. "Your shields are already compromised by our quantum field disruptors. Your engines are within range of our gravitic pulse cannons. Would you like a demonstration?" The captain watched in horror as his ship's shield indicators suddenly dropped to 0 without any visible attack. A small red dot appeared on his hull display, marking where a precision weapon had painted his engine section. "That was just a targeting system," Admiral James said softly. "The next one won't be. Take our warning back to your superiors. Tell them that Earth is off limits. Tell them that humans are not like the others they've conquered. Tell them, Captain," his eyes hardened slightly, "to run." The scout ship's captain had served the Empire for 20 years. He had participated in the subjugation of a dozen worlds. But as he stared at the calm human admiral and the array of unknown weapons surrounding his ship, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Fear. Without another word, the Imperial scout ship engaged its engines, turning away from Earth as quickly as its systems would allow. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, the captain couldn't shake the feeling that they had just awakened something far more dangerous than the Empire had ever encountered. Admiral James watched the ship retreat, then turned to his staff. "And so it begins," he said quietly. "Alert all commands. The Empire will be back, and next time, they won't send a scout." 3 days after the scout ship's retreat, a much larger vessel appeared at the edge of the solar system. This time, it was an Imperial diplomatic ship, its golden hull gleaming in the distant sunlight. Lord Vex, the Empire's most experienced negotiator, stood on its bridge with perfect posture and complete confidence. He had resolved conflicts across hundreds of worlds. Surely these humans would be no different. The humans had already prepared a meeting room on their lunar base. As Lord Vex's shuttle approached the moon, he noticed something odd. There were no visible weapons, no threatening displays of force, just clean, efficient architecture and a small welcoming party. Admiral James waited at the airlock, accompanied by General Thompson. Both wore simple uniforms without decoration or medals. This lack of pomp irritated Lord Vex, who had dressed in his finest ceremonial robes for the occasion. "Welcome to Luna Base," Admiral James said simply. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Lord Vex drew himself up to his full height. "The Empire extends its greetings to the human race. We have come to discuss your unusual response to our scout ship." "Of course," Admiral James replied, leading them to a plain conference room. "Though I suspect you're more interested in discussing why we know so much about your empire." Lord Vex's steps faltered slightly. He had hoped to lead the conversation, but these humans were frustratingly direct. Inside the conference room, a holographic display activated, showing a detailed map of Imperial space. "Let's start with your recent conquests," General Thompson said, highlighting several systems. "The Centauri worlds, the Rigel colonies, the Vega outposts, all absorbed into your empire within the last 5 years." "We prefer the term protective incorporation," Lord Vex said smoothly. "We bring civilization and order to. You bring subjugation and control," Admiral James interrupted. He touched a control, and the display showed hundreds of ships scattered throughout Imperial space. "These are your current fleet positions, all of them, including the battle group assembling near Proxima Centauri." Lord Vex's face darkened. "This is classified military information. How dare you spy on the Empire?" "We didn't need to spy," General Thompson said. "Your ships leak quantum signatures like scythes. Any civilization with basic quantum detection capabilities can track them. The fact that none of your conquered worlds noticed this tells us something interesting about your strategy. You target worlds that haven't developed quantum technology," Admiral James continued. "Worlds that can't detect your ships coming. Worlds that don't see you until it's too late." Lord Vex's diplomatic mask cracked slightly. "Are you suggesting the Empire is cowardly?" "We're suggesting the Empire is predictable," Admiral James replied. He pressed another button, and the room dimmed. New holographic images appeared. Massive defense platforms in Earth orbit, installations on Mars, bases beneath Europa's ice. "We've had decades to prepare, to watch, to build. Your empire has never fought a war against an equal," General Thompson added. "You've never had to. But humanity, we've fought ourselves for millennia. We know war. We understand it. And we've turned that understanding toward defense." Lord Vex laughed, but there was uncertainty in it. "You think your primitive weapons can stand against the Imperial fleet?" Admiral James smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "The weapons you can see are just the surface. The real defenses, well, let's hope you never have to encounter those." "Is that a threat?" Lord Vex demanded. "No," Admiral James said quietly. "It's a warning, one your empire should heed. Go home, Lord Vex. Tell your masters that Earth isn't worth the cost. Tell them that for once in their long history of conquest, they should simply walk away." "The Empire does not walk away," Lord Vex said stiffly. Then the Empire will learn a painful lesson, General Thompson replied. We've studied every battle you've fought for the past century. We know your tactics, your capabilities, your weaknesses. We've prepared specifically to counter everything you might throw at us. And unlike your other conquests, Admiral James added, standing up, we're giving you a chance to avoid the confrontation entirely. That's more than you've ever given others. Lord Vex stared at the two human officers, his diplomatic training warring with a growing sense of unease. For the first time in his long career, he wondered if perhaps the Empire had finally found a species it shouldn't have provoked. The Imperial War Council chamber buzzed with angry voices. 50 of the Empire's highest-ranking military leaders sat around a massive black table, all talking at once. At the head of the table, High Commander Rex slammed his fist down, bringing immediate silence. These humans dare to mock us, he growled. Their warnings are nothing but empty threats. No species has ever resisted the Empire's might. Fleet Commander Marcus watched all of this through hidden quantum sensors. The humans' observation systems have been recording the Empire's activities for years, and today's Emergency War Council was no exception. He stood in Earth's primary defense center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, studying the Imperial leaders' reactions. They're going to attack, he told his staff. Their pride won't let them do anything else. On his main screen, High Commander Rex was still speaking. We will send the Third Fleet, standard conquest formation. These humans will learn their place, just like all the others. Marcus smiled grimly. The Third Fleet was exactly what they had expected. The Empire's standard response to any resistance. 1,000 ships, arranged in their traditional arrow formation. It had worked on countless worlds before. But Earth was different. Alert all defense grid stations, Marcus ordered. Activate the quantum net. And someone wake up Admiral James. He'll want to see this. In space, Earth's preparations were invisible to normal sensors. Thousands of automated defense platforms hung silently in orbit, their quantum stealth systems making them completely undetectable to Imperial technology. On Mars and Europa, hidden bases powered up their weapon systems. In the asteroid belt, specially designed combat drones waited in the shadows of large rocks. The Empire's Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace near Jupiter 3 days later. Their ships formed a perfect arrow formation, just as they had done in every previous conquest. High Commander Rex himself led the fleet from his massive flagship. Send the standard surrender demand, Rex ordered. Let's see how brave these humans are when faced with real power. The message arrived at Earth's defense center moments later. Marcus read it and laughed. They're using the same surrender message they sent to the Centauri worlds, he told his staff. They haven't even bothered to change the wording. Admiral James walked in, looking like he'd just woken up. Are they in position? Marcus nodded. Perfect formation, exactly where we predicted they'd emerge. They still haven't detected any of our defenses. The Empire's greatest weakness, James said quietly, is that they think they have no weaknesses. He turned to his communication officer. Send our response. In his flagship, High Commander Rex was shocked when instead of a surrender, he received a tactical analysis of his fleet's vulnerabilities. The message detailed exactly how his ships were arranged, their weapon ranges, their shield frequencies, and their blind spots. Impossible, he shouted. How could they know all this? Before he could recover from his surprise, Marcus's voice came through their communication systems. Imperial Third Fleet, this is Earth Defense Command. Your formation has 6 major tactical weaknesses. Would you like us to demonstrate them? Rex stood from his command chair, purple face dark with rage. Open fire. Show these arrogant humans what real power looks like. 1,000 Imperial ships launched their weapons at once. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward Jupiter's orbit, where the Empire's sensors showed a collection of human defense satellites. But the satellites were just holograms. Earth's real defenses decloaked behind, above, and below the Imperial fleet. Marcus watched his tactical display as the carefully laid trap was sprung. "Target their command and control systems first," he ordered. "Let's show them why pride goes before a fall." The space around Jupiter lit up with weapons fire. But for the first time in Imperial history, they weren't the ones winning. "Send a message to High Commander Rex," Admiral James said, watching the battle unfold. "Tell him this is just our first line of defense. Ask him if he'd like to see the rest." High Commander Rex watched in horror as his perfect formation fell apart. The humans' weapons weren't just powerful. They were precise. Each shot targeted a specific weakness in Imperial ship design. Weaknesses that no one outside the Empire should have known about. "Shields failing on decks 3 through 7, his officer shouted. "They're using some kind of energy we've never seen before." Around his flagship, Imperial ships tried to regroup. But the humans had positioned their forces perfectly, breaking up every attempt at reformation. Earth's defense platforms seemed to predict every move before it happened. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Fleet Commander Marcus studied the battle display with calm satisfaction. "Their ships are trying to switch to attack pattern Delta," he noted, "just like they did at Rigel." "Let's show them why that won't work," Admiral James replied. "Activate the gravity nets." Invisible fields of distorted space suddenly appeared throughout the battlefield. Imperial ships found themselves unable to maneuver, caught in webs of artificial gravity that their engines couldn't overcome. It was like trying to fly through thick Sarah. Impossible. Rex slammed his fist on his command chair. "No species has developed gravity manipulation technology. It's theoretically impossible." His sensor officer's voice shook as he reported, "Sir, we're detecting energy readings from Mars and Europa. They're powering up something big." Hidden bases on Mars and Europa revealed themselves, massive weapon arrays emerging from beneath the ice and rock. They had been there for years, waiting for this moment. The Empire had never thought to look for threats on what they considered worthless chunks of rock and ice. "Third Fleet," Marcus's voice came through clear on all Imperial channels. "You have lost 30% of your ships. Your formation is broken. Your tactical advantage is gone. We offered you a chance to retreat. That offer still stands." Rex stood up, his pride still intact despite the situation. "The Empire does not retreat. All ships switch to maximum power. Overwhelm their defenses with everything we have." James shook his head as he watched the Imperial response. "They still don't understand," he said quietly. "Show them the drones." From the asteroid belt, thousands of small, fast ships emerged. Each one was controlled by an advanced AI, capable of making combat decisions faster than any living pilot. They swarmed toward the Imperial fleet like angry insects. "What are those things?" Rex demanded as the drones approached. "They're too small to be a threat." He realized his mistake when the first drone slipped through his flagship's weakened shields. Instead of attacking, it attached itself to the hull. Then another, and another. Soon, hundreds of drones were attached to Imperial ships throughout the fleet. "Warning," Rex's engineer shouted. "They're hacking our systems. Our computers are being overwritten." Throughout the Imperial fleet, ships began powering down. Weapons went offline. Engines shut down. Even life support systems were taken over, though the humans were careful to keep them running. They had no interest in killing their opponents. "Your ships are now under our control," Marcus announced to the fleet. "Don't worry, we're keeping life support active. We're not monsters, after all." Admiral James stepped forward. "High Commander Rex, your fleet has been defeated. You've lost half your ships, and the other half are now controlled by our systems. Would you like to see what else we can do, or would you prefer to take our warning seriously this time?" Rex stared at his dead control panels, his mighty flagship now nothing more than a powerless box floating in space. In 300 years of Imperial history, no fleet had ever been so thoroughly defeated. "One last thing," James added, his voice carrying a hint of steel. "The weapons we use today, they're decades old. Our first generation of defense technology. Would you like to find out what our current generation can do? For the first time in his long military career, High Commander Rex gave an order he never thought he'd give. Retreat. The Imperial Palace shook with the Emperor's rage. The loss of half the Third Fleet had sent shockwaves through the Empire. In the Grand War Room, emergency meetings had been running for 3 days straight. "Send everything," the Emperor commanded, his voice cold with fury. "Every ship, every weapon. I want these humans to understand the true might of the Empire." Throughout Imperial space, ships began to gather. Not just one fleet, but 7,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the Empire. They pulled vessels from every conquered world, leaving their territories almost undefended. On Earth, Fleet Commander Marcus watched the buildup through their quantum observation network. "They're really doing it," he told Admiral James. "They're committing their entire military force to this attack." James nodded, looking tired but determined. "They still think this is about pride, about showing their strength." He turned to his staff. "Power up the dimensional array. It's time to show them what we've been holding back." Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a massive facility hummed to life. Similar installations activated under the Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic Oceans. Technology that humanity had kept hidden for decades prepared for its first real test. The Imperial Armada emerged from hyperspace as one massive force, filling the space between Mars and Jupiter. Their ships formed a sphere around the solar system, trying to cut off any possible escape routes. They had learned from their last defeat. No more predictable formations. The Emperor himself commanded from a super dreadnought at the center of the formation. "Let them try their tricks now," he said, watching the tactical display. No force can stand against 7,000 ships. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Marcus studied the Imperial formation. "They've actually made this easier for us," he noted, "by clustering their ships so tightly. They've put them all within range of the dimensional field." James finished. He pressed a button on his command console. "All Earth forces, execute Operation Thunderbolt." Across Earth's orbit, thousands of defense platforms activated at once. But instead of firing weapons, they began generating overlapping fields of distorted spacetime. The effect spread outward at the speed of light, invisible to Imperial sensors. "Status report," the Emperor demanded as warning alarms blared throughout his fleet. "What are they doing?" His science officer stared at readings that made no sense. "They're folding space, sir. Creating artificial dimensions. Our ships are being pulled into." Before he could finish, ships throughout the Imperial fleet began to disappear. Not exploding or being destroyed, simply vanishing from normal space. "Don't worry," Marcus's voice came through on all Imperial channels. "Your ships are perfectly safe. We've simply moved them into a contained pocket dimension. Think of it as a temporary parking space." The Emperor watched in helpless rage as his fleet vanished section by section. Thousands of ships, the pride of the Empire, simply removed from the battlefield without a single shot being fired. "This is impossible," he shouted. "No civilization has mastered dimensional engineering. The energy requirements alone would be impossible with your technology." James agreed, his voice calm. "But we've had a long time to solve that problem. The real question is, would you like to see what else we can do?" The Emperor stood from his throne as his mighty super dreadnought began to shake. "You cannot treat the Empire this way. We have ruled the galaxy for 300 years. And in all that time," James replied, "you never considered that someone might be letting you rule. That someone might be watching, waiting, preparing, making sure no single power could threaten the galaxy as a whole." The Emperor's ship shuddered again as the dimensional field reached it. What are you?" "We're humanity's defense force," James said simply. "And we're a lot older than you think. Your empire has been around for 3 centuries. We've been preparing for threats like you for 3,000 years." The super dreadnought began to fade from normal space, along with the last remnants of the Imperial fleet. The Emperor's last view was of Earth, peaceful and blue, completely untouched by the Empire's greatest military force. In the pocket dimension where Earth had stored the Imperial fleet, 7,000 ships floated helplessly in a strange purple-tinted void. The Emperor stood on his bridge, watching his mighty armada drift like leaves in a cosmic wind. All their weapons, their shields, their engines, nothing worked here. "Send the signal," he finally said, his voice heavy with defeat. Tell them we're ready to talk." On Earth, Admiral James received the message in the Rocky Mountain Command Center. He looked at Fleet Commander Marcus, who nodded silently. It was time. "Prepare the conference room," James ordered, "and begin returning their ships, one at a time." In the void, Imperial ships started disappearing again, but this time they reappeared in normal space near Mars. Each vessel was carefully positioned, weapon systems still offline, but with life support and basic functions restored. The Emperor's super dreadnought emerged last, escorted by small human vessels that looked more like silverbirds than warships. As they approached Mars, the Emperor saw something that made his heart stop. A massive space station, easily 10 times the size of his largest ship, decloaking in Mars orbit. "Welcome to Forward Station Alpha," Admiral James's voice came through. "One of 50 such stations we've built throughout the galaxy over the last 1,000 years." The Emperor's hands gripped his command chair tightly. 50 stations, throughout the galaxy, but that's impossible. We would have detected them. "Would you?" Marcus asked. "You didn't detect our observation posts in your own capital system. Your sensors can't even find our ships unless we want them to." The Emperor's ship docked at the station, and for the first time, Imperial leaders saw the true extent of human technological advancement. The station's halls were filled with technology that they couldn't even understand. Doors opened into spaces that seemed to defy physics. Holographic displays showed real-time images from across the galaxy. In a large conference room, Admiral James waited with his staff. The Emperor entered, no longer the confident ruler of before, but a leader who had finally understood his place in a much larger universe. "Your empire," James began, "has ruled for 300 years. In that time, you've conquered hundreds of worlds, absorbed dozens of species. And we let you." "Let us?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus stepped forward, activating a holographic display. It showed thousands of points of light throughout the galaxy. "These are our monitoring stations. We've watched every empire rise and fall for the past 3,000 years. We've guided, redirected, and when necessary, stopped them." "But why?" the Emperor demanded. "If you have this kind of power, why not rule the galaxy yourselves?" James smiled sadly. "Because that's not our purpose. We're not conquerors, we're guardians." The display changed, showing something that made the Imperial leaders step back in fear. Massive shapes, moving between galaxies, things that defied comprehension. "There are threats out there," James explained, "far worse than anything your empire could imagine. Things that would consume entire galaxies without thought. We've fought them before. We'll fight them again. That's why we let younger empires rise," Marcus added. "Let them develop, grow, learn. But we also make sure none of them grow too powerful, too quickly. Balance is important." The Emperor sank into a chair, his worldview completely shattered. "All this time, all our conquests, were allowed," James finished, "until you came too close to Earth, until you threatened to upset the balance we've worked so hard to maintain." "What happens now?" the Emperor asked. Admiral James leaned forward. "Now, you have a choice. You can maintain your empire, but under new rules. Rules that will help prepare your people and all the species you've absorbed for what's coming. Or we can show you what else is in that pocket dimension where we stored your fleet. Trust me, you don't want that option." 1 month after the confrontation at Mars, the Emperor stood on Earth's surface for the first time. He looked up at the blue sky, so different from the purple heavens of his homeworld, and tried to process everything he had learned. Admiral James walked beside him through a vast underground facility beneath the Sahara Desert. "This is where it all began," James explained, 3,000 years ago, when we detected them for the first time. The facility's walls were covered in ancient markings, a timeline of humanity's secret history. Holographic displays showed scenes from Earth's past, the first detection of the cosmic horrors, the unified response of ancient humanity, the decision to become guardians rather than conquerors. "Your people achieved space travel so early," the Emperor noted. "We thought you were newcomers to the stars, but you were out there before my species even developed writing." "We had motivation," Marcus said, joining them. "When you know what's coming, you learn to prepare quickly." They entered a massive circular chamber. In its center, a holographic display showed the entire Milky Way galaxy, with thousands of points of light marking human monitoring stations. But beyond that, in the dark space between galaxies, massive shapes moved. "The Devourers," James said quietly. "That's what our ancestors called them. They consume entire galaxies, breaking down all matter and energy for their own use. They've already taken 17 galaxies in the observable universe." The Emperor watched the shapes move, feeling a primal fear he'd never known before. How do you fight such things?" "With preparation, with unity, with every species in the galaxy working together." James turned to face him. "That's why we let empires like yours exist. You unite worlds, bring species together, advance technology. But we make sure you don't grow too powerful too quickly, or in the wrong direction. Because a galaxy divided would be easy prey," the Emperor realized. "Exactly." Marcus pressed a button, and new images appeared. They showed massive structures hidden between stars, weapon platforms larger than solar systems, and technologies that made the Empire's greatest achievements look like children's toys. "What we showed you in the battle," James explained, "was nothing. Our dimensional technology, our quantum weapons, they're just the beginning. We have installations throughout the galaxy that could destroy stars, move planets, and reshape reality itself. But even with all that, you're barely holding them back," the Emperor finished, understanding at last. "Now you see why we need every species, every world, working together." James gestured to the galaxy map. "Your empire has united hundreds of worlds, taught them to work together, to advance their technology. That's good, but now they need to advance in the right direction." The Emperor looked at the human admiral. "What are you proposing?" "A partnership," James said simply. "Your empire remains intact, but with a new purpose. We'll share some of our technology, gradually, safely. You'll help prepare your worlds for what's coming. And when the time comes, we'll stand together," the Emperor said. Marcus nodded. "The Devourers will reach our galaxy in approximately 300 years. That's how long we have to prepare every species, every world, every person for the greatest fight in our galaxy's history." The Emperor looked again at the massive shapes moving between the stars. He thought about his empire's pride, their belief in their own superiority, their drive to conquer. How small it all seemed now. "I understand now," he said quietly, "why you warned us to run. You weren't threatening us. You were trying to prevent a distraction from your real mission." "And now?" James asked. The Emperor squared his shoulders. "Now we help you prepare. My empire pledges itself to Earth's cause. We will ready our worlds, train our people, and stand with humanity when the Devourers come." "Welcome," James said, extending his hand in the ancient human gesture of partnership to the real war. Far above them, in the space between galaxies, the Devourers continued their slow approach. But now, for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity wasn't facing them alone.